Welcome back. Today we're taking a look at the fallout of last month's terror attacks in Mumbai that left more than 150 people dead and resulted in rising tensions between India and Pakistan. From London, I'm joined by Dr. Marie Lal, Associate Fellow at the Asia Programme at Chatham House and an expert on South Asian affairs. Also from London, author and journalist Salil Tripathi, who writes frequently on economic, political and cultural issues affecting South Asia. And here with me in the studio is Vanda Felpap-Brown, Adjunct Professor in the Security Studies Programme at the School of Foreign Service, Georgetown University, and a Fellow in Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution. Well, welcome back to all of you again. Salil, I want to go back to you. One of the options being looked at by the Indian government is to introduce more anti-terror legislation. Does India need more anti-terror legislation?
No, that's the last thing India probably needs. India has a very strong record of laws which allow it to do preventive detention, to hold suspects without trial for a long time, produce them to the magistrate when it chooses to do so. There is an Armed Forces Act which allows military to pretty much act the way it wants. I mean, one has to just look at human rights organization reports to see how it can be misused. Political dissidents have been jailed under some of these laws in the past and have been misused in the past. So it's not the lack of laws that's the problem, but the lack of effective coordination, lack of effective implementation, lack of effective information sharing between the state and the federal units, between the ministries themselves. That's what's lacking. I mean, certainly the last thing India wants is a revival of POTA, the law that was just talked about before the break.
Well, just following on what Salil was telling us there about what India needs to do these attacks add new urgency to a resolution of the Kashmir problem?
They should add new urgency. It is not clear that they will in fact result in a platform for resolving the issue. It was mentioned that the peace process has been underway and there have been important accomplishments on Kashmir. For example, in October, greater travel and economic exchanges opened between the two sides of Kashmir. Nonetheless, the political situation is extremely difficult for both governments, both in India and in Pakistan. While Musharraf was willing to move ahead with the resolution of the Kashmir issue earlier, it's not clear that he carried the military and the intelligence services. It's not clear that there was similar receptivity in India. And the current tension, the political repercussions make it very hard to imagine how the initiative could move forward. At best, it can be put on ice.
Okay, I want to get a caller in right now. This is Iftidar talking to us from Dubai. Go ahead with your call.
Hi, my name is Iftikhar. I'm calling from Dubai. I've been living here for almost 6 to 7 years. And I've got very good friends who are Indians, and we share our views daily. And none of us, we want that India and Pakistan should go for war. I think we have been playing this game for almost 60 years, and nobody has achieved anything. At least our people have not achieved anything out of that, and neither India achieved anything out of that.
What is your question?
My question is that why we are still playing that blame game, and why we don't understand. We have got better brains than anywhere in the world. So why we don't understand that who wants us to fight?
All right, thank you. Let me put that question to Marie Lal in London.
Well, it's not a question of who wants us to fight. Obviously, India and Pakistan getting on would be a very strong unit. But this is a very troubled siblings relationship. I mean, ultimately speaking, it goes back to partition, goes back to 1947, goes back to millions of people who died, and the separation on the basis of religion. So these wounds take decades to heal. And even though this is 60 years old, it's India and Pakistan have still big differences, including the Kashmir problem. I totally agree with the fact that what was mentioned earlier on, that there is now an imperative need to solve the issue of Kashmir, despite the fact that both governments face domestic problems in going forward on that. But there's not an external hand as such wants necessarily to keep India and Pakistan at war with each other.
Vanda, you know, when we look at these attacks and we see what it's exposed in terms of the Indian defense, I mean, a question does arise. How could a country the size of India, with a population of over 1 billion, effectively have an anti-terrorist force that numbers only 7,400 men?
I think it betrays the difference in focus that Indian government, Indian military and security intelligence services have been pursuing. And perhaps it is the wake-up call, an important wake-up call, that certainly the counter-terrorism forces need to be strengthened. And India has suffered many terrorist attacks, some very horrific ones, including the 2006 bombings in Mumbai, the attack on the Indian parliament, and it suffers from internal terrorism and internal separatism, be it the Naxalites in the central part of the countries or various separatist and terrorist groups in the northeast. So the security forces oriented toward counterterrorism should not be so weak, and this should be an important moment for the Indian state to, in fact, redress this fundamental weakness and problem.
Marie, I just want to look at this.
I don't know if you're...
Go ahead.
I just wanted to come in on this. I don't know if you're aware that the commandos don't have their own plane. One of the reasons it takes them 6, 7, 8 hours to get to a particular site is because they don't have their own aircraft. They're absolutely underfunded, and there is simply not enough even material support by the government for the commando units who are based near Delhi. And obviously it took time to get them ready and get them to Mumbai.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, I think one of the interesting things that it showed that most of the commandos are all in one part of India, when it's such a vast country where there are many strategic installations all around the country, and why should they all be in one part of it is a very legitimate question to raise too.
I just want to turn our attention now to the situation inside Pakistan. And Salil, I wonder if you could address this. When one looks at those deep divisions that we were talking about earlier on between the military and the intelligence services on the one side and the civilian government on the other, do we see that balance of power changing now?
I wish I could be more of an optimist, but I cannot be, and it's not for want of any, it's not because I suspect the genuine desire for civil society emergence and democracy to take root in Pakistan. But I mean, there have been recent books by Ahmad Rashid and Tariq Ali, which have all been looking at what's happening, and Aisha Siddiqa's own work about the way the military has a grip over the country. When you have that on one hand, when you have the rise of fundamentalism on the other side, and a political setup which has historically betrayed the hopes of the people, you have a situation which is not entirely promising for building a system in which an alternate power structure can emerge to take on these very powerful forces. So you have this scenario that a civilian government which is not entirely in control of the military, which itself is not entirely in control of the ISI, which is not entirely in control of Lashkar-e-Taiba. So there's a very genuine question from those who are outside Pakistan looking at it, who is in charge?
Vanda, do you agree with those sentiments?
Yes, the history of Pakistan is an unfortunate history of very weak and very short-lived civilian governments replaced periodically by military coups, and the military really not being effective in ruling and strengthening Pakistan. Pakistan is a very fragile state. Some would even argue that it is a failing state. It faces an enormous internal challenge with many of the groups, Islamist groups that the ISI nurtured, getting out of control. It faces major economic problems, facing a very severe economic meltdown, and it was never capable of building political administration, governance institutions.
Okay, we have another caller on the line.
But
this is Mohammed. Okay, Marie, go ahead, and then we take the call after that.
Yeah, I think that's quite important to actually say that this is not entirely Pakistan's fault either, because of its geopolitical position. It's always been used to basically, whatever was going on in Afghanistan, you always needed a foot in Pakistan in order to fight what was happening in Afghanistan. And this goes back centuries. This goes back to the Great Game. So in many ways, the fact that the United States in particular wanted to see a pro-American government in power meant that there was support, for example, very clearly when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was taken from power and General Zia-ul-Haq was put in with American support, and we've seen this several times repeated. There were civilian governments which have been replaced by a military coups directly supported by the United States. So in many ways, it's not only Pakistan's fault. There is an external dimension to that as well.
Okay, Salil, I'm going to give you the last word on this, and we just have about 15 seconds.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the point some of the analysts in Pakistan have been making. So one of the hopeful sign out of it is that there is a lot of awareness of this issue and the need to come to grips with it.
Okay, thank you, and thanks to all of you for being with us, and thank you for watching us. On the next show, We look at the corruption scandal that is rocking America. The governor of the state of Illinois is accused of trying to sell President-elect Barack Obama's Senate seat. See you next time.